All right, hello, welcome to the podcast, Eat Better Food Today. I'm your host, Ken Cunningham, and I'm excited to be sharing insights on why we believe that health and longevity begins with the food we eat. Goal of this podcast will be to inspire, educate, and enable folks to live a healthier life and do it affordably. My wife and I have been on this journey for over 10 years and continue to work on it every single day. Percent of the profits from this podcast will be put towards child hunger, with initial focus on the poor suburb in America, East Cleveland, Ohio. As a reminder, please subscribe to this podcast and be sure to visit my website, Eat Better Food Today, for links to the show, videos, recipes, books, and articles our guests provide. On this episode, we're grateful to have Brian Devorkin, Case Western Reserve University medical student, founder of BackedBriScience, which we'll talk about, and client advocate for Absolute Rest. Brian grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin before attending the University of Michigan, where he obtained a BS in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology. He spent a year working under the renowned Harvard aging scientist David Sinclair before starting at Case Western. Brian and I met this year at Case Western's kitchen, where he was preparing a healthy meal as part of a wellness class. I know he's excited to share thoughts on his medical career, his podcast, his research, and what continues to inspire him. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I appreciate you doing the research on me. It saved me some time and explanation.
Like to know who I'm talking to. So the first question I always ask, I always get interesting answers to, but I think it's part of a healthy lifestyle, depending on how you answer this question, but what you had for breakfast this morning.
Ooh, that's a good question. So my breakfast, I'm very routine oriented. So a lot of these questions you ask me, some people might think on or might change. For me, not much changes. I like to keep it consistent. But I usually wake up and I have a huge blender bottle smoothie, full 32 ounce with 3/4 way full of ice. So it's really filling in the morning, while also feeling light. And so I just do a really pure protein powder with banana and almond milk, and that's all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Very simple.
Yeah, I'm up to about 8 ingredients in my smoothies. So.
Okay. Like that. Yeah.
I keep listening to things and kind of adding things here and there.
Yeah. They get you excited, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, my alma mater is Ohio State, and when my daughter was going to interview, she was a civil engineer. That's what she did undergraduate. But anyways, when she went to various colleges, she picked UM to kind of visit. So we sit down in the room, and they start playing the Michigan fight song. And I'm from Ohio State. It's like, oh, what have I done? So I know you're a U of M grad. So just kind of want to initially start here and just talk about kind of how you got from Wisconsin to Case Western Reserve University with a couple of stops in between there.
Yeah, I'm glad that you had some exposure, personal experiences to open you to Michigan. So I didn't know where that was going to go when you started. I get the difficulty there, bridging the gap. But yeah, so my path was one of serendipity, and we'll start from the beginning of I grew up in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Pretty normal life growing up, and just always kind of knew science, health, medicine. It always just was appealing to me. And then background was really just orthopedic sciences. I was in sports, and it just made sense.
Mm-hmm.
The culture, the lifestyle, everything about it seemed attractive. Then I got to undergrad. I went to University of Michigan. It was one of those things where it just felt right. Like it hasn't happened many times in my life where it's just like you just know it. Mm-hmm. It's like that. And so when people ask, it's hard to articulate, but it's just everything about Michigan, University of Michigan, spoke to me. And so I went there, and everything was super certain. I was super, super dedicated, super in my studies, unquestioning, relentless. And then COVID hit, and a lot of things changed in my mind due to the fact that learning was different. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like it as much. I had to adjust to a different platform, a different environment. And it really made me question everything. It really made me question what I was doing and why. And then I realized, thankfully, medicine was still what I wanted to do, but it wasn't orthopedic sports med. It wasn't anything surgical. It was actually something that really doesn't even exist, which is longevity medicine, health optimization. And I would say that it came from multiple experiences. And if you look at my content or talks, it's kind of dwindled all over, but some things that haven't really come up often they're more personal. It relates to family. It relates to a lot of personal experiences where I have a superficially healthy family, people that work out, eat healthy, but there was just more I saw for them. but no one could give them more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to be someone that could actually stand for others who felt like they were missing out or actually were, again, on the surface healthy, but dealing with these issues that no one really knew how to fix or prevent or delay. And so that's kind of where my passion came from. And then it really manifested into nutrition and exercise and sleep. And all of a sudden it was longevity, it was wellness, it was all the different pillars. And then that took me kind of into continuous of my studies, continuation. And then I ended up with that in mind, knowing what I wanted to do, taking a gap year and working now that I knew what I wanted to, having an ambitious goal of finding something meaningful. So I reached out to many different people, ended up with Dr. David Sinclair. Is one of those things where time is of the essence, and it was perfect. He was starting a longevity coaching business, and I became his right hand man, and it was really amazing. It was an amazing experience in Boston, and that brought me up right to Case Western, where now I'm in Cleveland as a med student and learning a little bit more Western medicine to pair my background and some of the other stuff. Well, as you mentioned, doing some still longevity health optimization on the side.
So how does that kind of mix or not mix? Kind of, I'll call it what you call Western medicine versus kind of the different path you're.
Yeah, I call it Western just because I think that's what most people are familiar
Yeah.
with, just traditional med school. My personal experience is that it doesn't mix well at all. And in the sense that I'm really happy to be doing it. I'm really happy to be learning a disease model because at the basis of the disease is the physiology.
Right.
And so having an understanding of all the background of the science, biochem, really at a cellular level coming with my major at Michigan. It's all very exciting and helping me understand research, how to interpret what things actually can mean. But then it adds that extra difficult element of there is disease that for me is something less applicable, more motivational so that I can delay that. But my ideally, the patients, the clients I work with are actually going to possibly, again, avoid is a strong word. So I've been trying to use delay more so as long as possible. So holding those diseases off is really the goal of what I want to work with, of keeping people as healthy as long as possible.
Nice. So what did you learn working for David Sinclair? I mean, he's in this space, kind of everybody knows David Sinclair. So he's written a book, which I have not read yet, but plan to. So what were some of the learnings there? I mean, you were there for a year, helping him, working with him.
Yeah, you have quite the, for the people not watching, a nice amount of books here, which he has claimed that he's read them all, which is great.
Read all of them.
Yes, all good choices. And David Sinclair's, so Dr. Sinclair's is going to be something similar to all the ones you have here, except that he definitely differentiates himself because when you read it, you'll know he's a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because he's far more interested in the theoretical science and much more interested in what can be possible based on research that is done in his lab, a world-renowned lab. And so while he promotes healthfulness in a very similar light to all these individuals, and again, everyone's going to say meat, no meat, certain things like that.
Right.
But in general, his principles are pretty sound. The one additional layer that he would actually add is then more focus on supplements and medications, like what science can actually do to support the continuation, the advancements of longevity in our species, of just how healthfully can we live, and is there a golden bullet? And he would say, not to speak for him, but he would be more willing to look for this golden bullet, finding ways to see it out there for people so that you can take a medication or supplement and, like we see in mice, which we're very good at controlling in aging, we would like to see that in humans. We can, add 20-50% increase in lifespan, which is huge.
So I've had gentleman Farmer Lee Jones was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and so he's talked about when his farm basically went under when he was a little kid, and then they started rethinking how they could redo farming, and so now they do regenerative farming. And so what he did is look back over like 100 years and said, when we did things this way, which is how he now does them today, the food we were eating were a lot healthier. So you didn't need, for example, he said, when you eat a head of broccoli today, you need to eat 5 heads of broccoli today to match what if you got a head of broccoli 100 years ago. So that from a nutritional value standpoint. So that leads to meaning, like you're talking about supplements, you have to have supplements today because the food we're eating is not as healthy as the food we're eating, 100 years ago for a lot of reasons. But So just what are your thoughts on the food versus the supplement side, I guess?
So it's funny because I'm actually someone who's super interested and really likes to hear and talk and discuss all the things that you're talking about. But I'm also the biggest skeptic there is. And so my answer to that is there's actually an article, I believe it was in JAMA, that just came out. It's probably last week now. 400,000 plus individuals. It was a study that was observational. It was not a randomized controlled study, but it looked at over 20 years of data and saw no change in all-cause mortality. So really no life expansion benefit to a multivitamin. And so again, that is very, very loose. What does that mean? And what kind of multivitamin? What's in the vitamin? Are they compliant? Or generally, the answer is just consider a multivitamin. Someone taking that every day for 20 years. And it's interesting to see that no, there was no change in all-cause mortality. And if someone were to ask me, I wouldn't. Prior to seeing that study, I probably wouldn't have been surprised. I probably would have predicted that. Because I think we do have a tendency to over-supplement, to think that the supplement is necessary, but it really, of itself, it's in the name, it's a supplement. And so I like to phrase it that 95% of health comes from all the things that are done by you. So it's the stress, the sleep, the socialization, it's exercise, it is nutrition, which even eating in a processed diet in a processed world, and for many years, if you eat fairly well, just fairly well, it makes sense that you'd get most of your vitamins, most of the deficiencies would not be existent. But again, I guess just to answer your question in terms of supplements as a whole, I would love to see that study done as a randomized controlled trial vigorously based on blood tests. And even then, I'm skeptical of how much would that really do if you're doing all the other stuff.
Yeah, and there's somebody that I respect. I'm not going to name the name. I listen to his podcast every week, but he takes 75 supplements a day.
Right.
That just seems, that's a lot. I mean, I take a few, but I do not take 75 supplements a day.
I would be curious to see if they're, and it's a very loose hypothesis, but it'd be interesting to see if that's doing more harm than good.
Yeah. So, I'm just curious, because I kind of want to read that about. So, who else do you kind of pay attention to in this kind of health and wellness space?
Some of my favorite people.
Yeah.
I would say that when people are like, hey, I'm getting into this, who do you recommend? Most of the people I do listen to are going to be a little bit more advanced. Just when you have a stronger background in science, it's more fun when they are able to dive deep into the research. It can be clinically oriented, whatever it is. But the people I'd recommend, one, Dr. Peter Attia, very, very famous. Everything he does, everything he says is extremely, extremely rigorously researched and very trustworthy. So someone I definitely recommend. Another one in nutrition, he breaks it down really, really well, and he's actually he kind of flagged himself as the anti-BS social media king is Lane Norton. He's a PhD in exceptional bio Lane on Instagram, I believe. Huge following. And besides that, the other two are Dan Garner and Eddie Galpin. So those for me are just extremely interesting and extremely reliable, intelligent people that I trust when they come out with content, because it's a good question. There's a lot of influencers, like maybe good examples, Liver King, that are not providing the best available evidence or data. I
think we can agree there. Well, you just gave me a couple names I haven't listened to yet, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
To our listeners.
Check them out.
So, kind of looking into some of your background, I want to talk about your website and your podcast, but you've worked with middle school students, you've worked as an EMT, you've worked as a crisis counselor, you worked at hospice, longevity coach, sleep client advocate. You've done a lot of different things over a very short amount of years here. So why did you pick, I guess, all these different, it's kind of a very diverse set of things you've done here in addition to the medical health and wellness space?
Yeah, so I early on became really frustrated with what med school entails, which is checking boxes. And so for me, it became about creating a story that actually felt authentic to me. And so instead of trying to piece everything together to make it look good, to all track or have some really strong algorithm of like, this is what he's going to do next for whatever medical school admission committee's reading my application, I just said I want to be passionate about what I'm doing. And so everything you see on there is really just things that filled me with joy, or things that I felt that I could make an impact in or impacted me in a positive light. And so every single different experience I've ever had is has just been if you're open to it, and I firmly believe this, just willing to teach you something, no matter how small or big. It's just as long as you're open to it. It's really helped me grow as a person and with different experiences, and I'm very grateful for all of it.
I mean, I spent some time in hospice with my mother-in-law when she was kind of near. I mean, that's a tough job. That's a tough environment to be in.
And it's funny you say that, because I've had this conversation with a few people, and sometimes it surprises them when they're like hospice, and that's always their reaction. And so it didn't really occur to me for a really long time that it was unique, and because for me it's very normal. Like, it's not a difficult environment to be in. It's a mindset that I've taken when I'm there, that it actually is very calming and surreal, that I just get to provide these patients who are at the end of their road with care. That's all, and just get to be with them and treat them the same way I would want to be treated. And so I don't really think anything further than that. And so my experience with hospice is really just one of positive, and actually I don't leave there sad, I leave there happy.
Nice. I mean, we need people help. I mean, the people where my mother-in-law was were absolutely outstanding people. I mean, just I applaud you for that.
I appreciate it.
All right, so on your website, BackedBriScience and the accompanying podcast, the headline on your website is Health Done Different, Empower Your Wellness Journey with Science-Backed Strategies. Maybe just give us a little bit of background on kind of why you have the website, the podcast, kind of what you're trying to do there based on where you're headed here.
Yeah, so it's probably long overdue, but there's a thing commonly known as imposter syndrome, as being afraid I wasn't ready or too young. And so I finally was harassed by enough of my friends after having multiple people just constantly hackling me for ideas or having questions and asking me, and then hearing me talk so passionately. And they would say, why don't you just do this? Like, why don't you have a podcast? Why don't you have a website? Like, why don't you have somewhere for people to go that you can kind of start? And because I said I wasn't ready, I wanted to be perfect. And so then when I dropped the act of needing to be perfect and realized that I did want it, it quickly transformed into BackedBriScience. And so it was a joke of a name that I randomly came up with in Boston when I was there. A friend visited. We were walking, and one of the friends that was hassling me, and I said, what if I just called it BackedBriScience? My name's Brian, so instead of BackedBri. And it kind of just was an idea that stuck with me until a year later, this past year, that I actually developed the website and podcast, and said I'm just going to do it. And it really was easy. It didn't take me long to think of a short jargon slogan of just Health Done Different, because the reason I was doing it is because I wanted different. It's because I'm really sick of so many of the influencers, or so many of just people, doctors, regardless of the credentials, that are just so unfit to speak about certain topics, and only knowing that because of what they say when they do speak. So I just wanted there to be a place where health can be done different, and it can be done in a way that's sustainable and really tailored to the individual. Because again, sustainable is the key word you'll hear me say over and over again, because nothing matters if it doesn't stick. Nothing. Right. It just really doesn't. And so health isn't health unless it can be applied to the individual, and that's really what a lot of my interest is in, is just working with individuals to personalize a program that they can actually adhere to, that makes them feel good about themselves in whatever way.
So how do you get, because this is kind of the challenge, I mean, I talk about this in the show a lot, but how do you get people, I mean, I know some of the people listen to our show here, they're older, so I'll say past 50, so they're interested in longevity and health because they're on the other half of their lifespan, versus younger people such as yourself, they just don't care at this point. They're just saying, I'm invincible, I'm young, I can eat, run, jump, do whatever I want. So how do you get people motivated to want to adopt a better lifestyle, I guess? I mean,
I would say that in my experience, it kind of comes down to what actually being a good doctor is. It's just motivational interviewing. It comes to showing them what's possible, and for me, what's always resonated is knowledge. Mm-hmm. And when you show up passionate about something, living the work, I think that's important. It can actually give people hope to what things can look like, and again, giving them hope means that there's actually something that they're striving for, and so giving them a destination, giving them objective data that they can use to pair with the subjective feedback they're receiving as they're undergoing these different health routines and changes, because it's really easy to give up when you don't see results. And so when you take away diet soda and it feels no different, when you take away sugar, it feels no different. When you start sleeping and working on breathing before bed and you say you sleep the same, all these changes over a very long period of time make a big difference. And mm-hmm. It's important to provide knowledge, insight, perspective, so that people can actually understand what and why they're doing it. And I think so far the reason that this whole field has blown up is just because we're starting to understand how to articulate, iterate, and research some of this stuff so that people can actually make changes.
Well, I think part of it is too because people are talking about it more. There's being more research is being done, and people are, in general, I mean, I've got a bunch of stats, but I mean, people are getting sicker younger. So it's not, we're not as healthy, at least here in the U.S., as a population as we were 20 years ago, 50 years ago, from just a health standpoint. So it's kind of, I mean, so that's why I asked the question, because it seems the people that I see changing is because of something that's happening. They've gotten a heart disease, they've gotten type 2 diabetes, they're on a lot of medications for what there's things that have happened in their lives that are, causing them to look and change. I guess, versus just being a healthy person and saying I should do something now so I don't ever, have that chronic disease.
Yeah, and it's never too late to make a difference.
That's an important point. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
But ideally, this will be a mission of mine to work with people before they get to what you were just saying, of motivated by sickness. Yeah. I'd rather them be motivated by delaying sickness and permanent health.
Yeah. So, COVID. I know you talked about kind of a life-changing event for you. What from a medical standpoint, are you seeing any changes? Long COVID seems to still be talked about. I still have friends that are getting COVID. I mean, is this going to go on forever, or is this? I guess, what are your thoughts on the COVID topic?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big topic. I was very interested in it and trying to read up and be as in the know as possible when it first happened. Mm-hmm. And then it was just exhausting because there is a lot on it, and there will continue to be a lot on it. And what I would say is that I think it's finally dampened out, and there's a better understanding of more realistically what's going on and where we are in the current state and what we can kind of expect moving forward. And I would say that there's going to be a lot of new drugs and treatments and hope for people that experience long COVID. Mm-hmm. And it's real and it's a problem. And I would say that we can be very thankful for what medicine has done so far to help slow down the spread when it was a real problem. Mm-hmm. But the same way that most viruses work, and it has just become a thankfully less problematic strain, and it's become less aggressive in a sense of death rates are down, and overall we're out of an emergency state. Yeah. And so we don't have to be isolated, and masks, the different protocols around masking is changing, and so we're getting a much better understanding. So this is a really good time to just raise the red flag, white flag in medicine of here's how science works. Mm-hmm. Like, we make mistakes, and it's unfortunate that people speaking on the big stage made a mistake in certain knowledge early on, using the best possible information they could, but that's what science is. So some people, gave up on it, and this, not to get into this whole vaccine issue of people not trusting it, but again, it's just understanding science. It's a moving target. We're always finding out more, and so it's, again, what we could say in another 50 years might be different than what we're saying completely now.
How about some of the things I read, elite performers you've kind of worked with some elite performers. How does that differ, from the average person, just as far as what they need to be doing from a health and wellness standpoint?
I would say that the elite performer is doing the same thing as any other athlete, because I do like to stress that we're all athletes. They're doing the same thing, but 100 times better. And so when they come in, most of the things are already optimized. So it's actually challenging you to look even further down the road at brakes and gas. So what are they putting on the gas? Most of the time the gas is going to be they're constantly working out, they're taking care of themselves, they're adequately fueled, but taking away some of the breaks of stress, of sleep, of things that are holding them back, and finding the right balance, delicate balance of diet, nutrition, and exercise, different modalities, optimizing certain motions and routines, what they're doing, blood work to make sure everything's okay, and supplements to make sure everything, again, is optimal to support whatever comes back in the findings. It's really just all hands on deck. It just is another step up, and it's fun to work with athletes because their whole life is surrounded about a job of being at their best. And so they're very motivated.
So how do you know what to provide them? I mean, they're an elite performer, but I mean, how much food, how much carbs, protein, exercise, how does that get figured out, I guess, for those elite performers?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in two ways, because one was a little bit more nutrition based and one's overarching. The overall response that came right to me is just, they tell me. They'll tell you, they'll tell us. They, most of the time, are very smart. And so most people probably could coach themselves, but it's a lot easier to motivate when others are willing to point things out, because we're talking about things that are routine. And speaking from experience, it's really hard to change routine. I get that. I like my routine. And so when you have a coach to help motivate you, to point things out, to show blind spots, but also shed light on certain factors you might know but just needed help in the direction, that can make a big difference. And the thing related to just more now on nutrition, a direct example could be, you asked about, let's just talk about macronutrients. It's going to depend on the goals, and it then just kind of correlates to what my actual overarching ideology is on nutrition, which is it's really just balance. It's based on what the athlete's doing. So if someone likes a ketogenic diet, I might have zero issues with that. If they're doing things like maximum anaerobic 1 rep max capacity lifts, so they're an Olympic lifter. Now, if we're talking about someone in the Tour de France, that might be different. That might be a conversation we'd have to have of, okay, why are you on a ketogenic diet? Why do you want no carbs? But overall, again, it can get very specific, and there's times where it can be really fun to bring in some really sexy science, but a lot of the times it's using basic principles in a way that aren't always actually as understood as people think. It's making them rethink what they think is already true.
Do you do any testing to kind of see what their, I guess, any deficiencies in their diet, for example, or do you just kind of do it based on their, basketball player, baseball player, going to go ride the Tour de France, so there's different based on the type of athlete they are, I guess. How does that all kind of work?
Yeah.
I'm going to have the nutritionist for the Cleveland Cavaliers is going to be on in a couple of weeks. So
cool.
It's going to be interesting to see how she takes care of those athletes.
Yeah, I'll definitely be interested to listen to that. This is coming ahead, so if I'm right, you guys will all think I'm a genius, but I'm going to guess it's going to be very flexible. I'm going to guess it's really just tweaks that she's willing to make. It's going to come down to, like, overall, just there's certain things you got to hit, right? Like, there's certain markers of protein, there's certain markers of calories, and making sure you're getting enough in. And I think the biggest thing that she's going to do for these athletes is, how do you fuel when there's competition, right? Like, they're playing late at night.
Right.
How do you eating after affecting your sleep, not feeling good? How do you fuel up to it? those are some of the bigger things I think that she'll really help with, rather than make sure you eat this for breakfast, this for lunch. It's going to look a little different than that. So that'll be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it will be.
But yeah, the question on measurements is we do a ton. Every possible marker you can basically have done, blood work, and in this current Company Absolute Rest, we do a whole bunch on sleep analysis, more than you could ever dream. And so biomarkers are really king nowadays, and for a good reason. There's some that are more scientifically backed than others, more we know. So like being in this range compared to, right, like insulin's been studied for 100 years now, over 100 years. So glucose and parameters around that are much more understood than newer markers that are coming up. And so for example, there would be the gut microbiome, which there are plenty of tests now. And again, it's just being careful because not all of them are as accurate, sensitive, specific as we want. But it doesn't mean they're not useful. So it's just making sure you're doing the right test for the right reasons, and then having the right person read those results.
Yeah. Well, everybody's different. I mean, even an athlete, I mean, you and I playing basketball or baseball or whatever, my body's different than your body, so it's going to need a little bit different, right? Nutrition, sleep, exercise, we're all different people. So trying to just say everybody do this, in this box, and you're going to perform is not, I don't think it's the right answer.
No, and I would say, to counteract your point, you can make it a right answer, but you're going to make it incredibly broad. So if someone said like, hey, what's unanimous to everybody? I would say eat a whole foods diet with plenty of nutrients, make sure you're adequately fueled, get enough sleep, don't stress, be happy, and make sure you're as fit as possible while being safe to other metrics of health. Like that, at a surface level,
that's like the basics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they apply to everyone, but then, like you said, yes, you have to tailor it to, okay, well, what does that mean? What does that actually mean for the individual? How are they applying that? All
right, so food is medicine. A lot of conversation about that. These books here talk about it as well. So what are your thoughts on, Tufts now has a center, food is medicine. University Hospitals is doing something similar, but they're tailoring it towards people in, I'll say, disadvantaged areas, in Cleveland, trying to get them to eat healthier. So what are your thoughts on just in general food is medicine, I guess? Kind of back to your Whole Foods comment.
Yeah, I've gone in and out of like how important, there's all these arguments of like, and does it even matter, but what's the most important metric for health? Like, do we look at nutrition, exercise, is it sleep? Like what big thing what lever can we pull that actually has the biggest impact? And nutrition used to be my answer. And I guess I'll just reveal it right away. It's now I would actually lean more towards exercise, but not to say nutrition isn't important. But nutrition does play a role as food is medicine. And I think this is where some of the skepticalness of me came from, of there's a lot of studies and a lot of observational and epidemiological, which basically means there's associations, correlations, which are not causative, but we're just like, okay, here's something that seems to be linked. And so again, the more soda you drink, the more likely you are to die. You'll see studies like that. It'll say, 70% increase in all-cause mortality, and just because you drink soda. Again, that's a correlation, and I think it's a fairly bad one. And I think where I'm going with this is that most of nutrition is somewhat irrelevant. I think for most people, if we can hit that 80% of just eat fairly well, that's really what matters. And the bigger thing is actually, like, the reason that this is like a public health, like, hey, to the public, I would just say eat as best you can. It is very important. Is because it helps you maintain your weight. The biggest thing is going to be maintaining your weight, but it's really difficult to do that in a hyper palatable food environment that we live in now. And so if you can eat whole foods, and if you can actually eat a whatever diet, the reason like vegan, vegetarian, keto, carnivore work is because they're very restrictive. And so it's a lot easier to be full when you have less options. That's very known in the research of have a meal with 100 different dishes versus just one, and you'll fill up a lot sooner. And so again, with whole foods, the volume, the water content, everything, the way your body works, it's very miraculous. And so providing the proper nutrition, yes, nutrients are important, and that's another great reason to make sure you're eating healthy. but also just to make sure that you can maintain a healthy weight. And again, it's very difficult for people to do that with the diets that we now have.
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot of, so this is confusing, I think, for people trying to eat healthy. You're right. A, there's a lot of diets. B, there's also a lot of research on nutrition that's you kind of reference this. It kind of says, eat these things like whole foods and these things. But on the other side, you've got large companies that make ultra-processed foods doing paying for their own studies, saying because I just saw this study in the last, 30 days here, saying ultra-processed foods is there's no harm to the body. Everything you're reading about is, not true, blah, blah, blah. So you get research on both ends of the spectrum, I guess is kind of my point. So you got to be able to wade through that and figure out, what's best for the individuals. But I don't think it's ultra-processed foods. I mean, that's what's readily available to most people today, but I don't think that's the answer.
Right, and yeah, it's like, with the news, I feel like the elephant in the room of that. There's just too many different opinions, too many strong,
Yes.
credentialed, unworthy people speaking about certain topics that they're not even hitting the right point of articles.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're grabbing at these nitpick studies that only researchers who are in the field that see dozens come out every day, and the correlations and what's actually where the data's trending should be picked up on, but that's not what we actually see. It's these sexy catchphrases and headlines. And so you'll see just terrible citing of sources and studies of major breakthrough headlines, and it just can really confuse people. So it's just something to look out for, and it's unfortunate, but it's kind of counteracting some of the good sources of social influencers with confounding all these different beliefs of making people think that things are a lot more complicated than they need to be.
Yeah, so we talk a lot on the show about, getting back to basics, the whole foods. You're going to get a can of beans, make sure it just has a couple of ingredients and not a lot of other junk in there, beans, water, salt. I mean, that should be about it. And so, and you can eat a healthy diet. You don't have to eat everything organic. Like you said, 80-20 rule, you don't have to eat healthy all the time. So that's, you just kind of gotta feel comfortable about what you're eating, A, but B, you do need to pay attention to what you're eating as well most of the time.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and don't let perfect or great be the enemy of good. Of just even if it's 60-40 for someone that's doing 30-70, just any small changes are huge.
Yeah, that's a
huge.
Good point. Yeah.
Some people, it's crazy to see some of the studies showing like the average, or not even studies, but just like consensus data of how much fruit people are eating a day or vegetable servings. It's minimal.
Yes.
Adding like one apple a day for most people is like unheard of, and so just these small changes can actually make a difference over time, and it's just trending in the right direction of that. And one thing that I did want to comment on, just because of the population sometimes I work with, which is more elite performers or healthy individuals, oftentimes that work out a lot, and you'll actually see that ultra processed foods, and again, I'm talking a little bit more of, let's just say like crackers or things that are a little bit more snacky, but it doesn't have to mean it's like cake or cookies, whatever dessert. But ultra-processed food can actually be helpful in certain individuals, where The Rock is a good example of, I think he reported 5,000, 10,000 calories a day. If you eat 10,000 calories of vegetables, I promise you are going to feel awful, because that is a lot of volume.
Yeah,
and there's just no way that any human could sustain that. And so there is actually a utility to ultra-processed foods, which is why it's important to not demonize them in every sense, that the individual, and when you talk with the Cavs nutritionist, how they can actually fuel before games and not feel bloated and make sure they're ready to perform. They're working out and exercising a lot, so how can they get those calories in? Sometimes calories become an issue, and that's when this can actually be useful.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be, if you're not an athlete and you're watching versus doing what they're doing on TV from an athletic standpoint, you shouldn't be sitting on the couch eating a bag of Doritos. I mean, that's not.
Yeah, this was not an advertisement for ultra-processed foods, so do not go out and buy as much as you can.
Yeah, you're talking about a very different use case.
Yes.
Than,
this was just an example of how personalized nutrition is important, because there's always exceptions to every rule.
Yeah. So what, I guess so do you have any stories about like all these different areas you've worked in, kind of what you did for David Sinclair, I guess any stories that talk about how you've talked or intervened or helped somebody to improve their health and wellness based on sleep, food, exercise?
Yes, I'm always trying to be careful because I'm young, so I'm always new to the NDAs of disclosing information.
No
but
names.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, but in general, the greatest stories, like what brings me the greatest joy, is really the people that come and they're a bit newer, so they're healthy but are just opening their minds that there's more possible. And it's the people that are coming open-minded, ready to change, because a lot of people that come into these programs, they just either want the silver bullet, the gold bullet, just give me a pill, a supplement, something. I don't have to do any work, but everything's going to change. My life's going to change. That's really not going to happen unless you're dealing with an illness. It's like, okay, we just removed it with a medication or whatever.
So you can't just take Ozempic and solve
Right.
all your problems.
Well, with weight loss, maybe right, but I don't know. There's a lot more to that one.
Yeah.
But just in general, yeah, these people that are coming open-minded and making these sustainable changes, and they're actually seeing growth and willing to do those behavioral interventions of sleep, of breathing, of stress reduction, of not kind of closing off the idea of mental health and like what can breathing do and relaxing and all these things. But like really, there's a lot of small things that are actually can make a huge difference in people's lives. And so it's really fun to enlighten people to that.
I would agree. I mean, when I kind of mentioned, so the Dan Barber book here was 2014. Mark Hyman, I got introduced to him in 2014. I would say it took me a couple of years to kind of warm up to everything that they were talking about. So I mean, because it's not just food. Food's important, exercise important, but sleep, wellness. I'll call it, stress. I was in a very stressful job when I was in IT for many years. So you got to kind of it all does work together, and it all does work. I mean, people need to pay attention to that. So, and it's not just one silver bullet.
Exactly. Yeah, and nothing to motivate people like a boatload of money spending on big programs that they're investing in their health to say, okay, I guess it's time for a change. So it's really nice when people come in the door already like, no, I'm ready. And so, yeah, and it doesn't have to be money, but yeah, the biggest takeaway I could say from this entire talk is just invest in yourself.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So what's next for you? I mean, you've got a lot. As I did my research, a lot of things going on, but directionally, I mean, where do you see yourself in 5 years? You're going to graduate from medical school, then what?
Yeah, so in a medical field, I like to do the 10/20 year plan because it is a long plan. So 5 really doesn't cut much.
Yeah.
But in general, because of where I want to go, like I mentioned, it's not really in medicine yet. Longevity, health optimization.
Right.
So I'm trying to learn as much as I can on the side from the people that are in it right now, that are developing it, and I'll continue to do that. Whether that be at Absolute Rest, which is amazing, and I'm very grateful for it all. So I plan to definitely keep on. But or as I get older, starting my own company, and so that would, I guess, be more the answer of the ultimate dream is to go to residency, probably internal medicine, get a background in the general field of training, so I have a nice eyeball of an understanding of all of it, and I have my MD. I can practice as a practitioner, a clinician, and then eventually, when I'm comfortable, I would start my own practice, and the practice would actually turn into a longevity center. It'll be more than just a practice because I do want to see patients. I want to make a difference. I want to health optimize and show that the medicine can be done, health can be done different, but also that I want to see it being done. And so having a nutrition on site, whether that be a small little restaurant or smoothie shack, and with a gym where the exercise can be done, where people are motivated by the culture, creating a community. I want to be that community. I want to create that.
Nice. Well, I hope you get there.
Yeah, I will keep you posted. I plan to get there. So.
Good approach. All right, so did you bring a recipe today did we talk about that?
Did not bring a recipe.
Did not bring a recipe. Okay. So typically we end the show, I ask about a recipe for under $25, feed a family of 4 with a few ingredients they can make, in a half hour or so.
So my answer could probably be done because I'm, again, routine based and very, very simple with my cooking. And so for $25, I would say, buy chicken breasts
Mm-hmm.
and then pair it with a grain, which are very, very cheap. And I like to make them in bulk, so you can actually make 3 cups. It'll last you the whole week. For a family, it should last a few days if the whole family's eating it. But you do chicken breast, rice, and then vegetables. However, whatever stir fry you want to make until you hit that budget. And the vegetables are going to be, the thing that are going to limit really the price, or they're going to limit your budget because they are expensive for calories when you're thinking of what you get and how full you get from them.
Mm-hmm.
They're filling, but in a different sense. You'll be hungry later because calorie wise they're low. So calorie density low, but pairing that with the chicken and some sort of grain and then vegetables, really what I do every night.
Any specific vegetables you like to recommend, or in the...
What again, whatever they adhere to, whatever they're willing to enjoy, whatever they do enjoy. And so for me, I like every vegetable, so I basically have a stir fry of every vegetable I can imagine, and then I just kind of cycle and make them in bulk and eat them for the whole week. I'm not picky, so I do plenty of leftovers, and it's an easy way, no matter how busy you are, that you can prepare a really big meal that'll last you as long as you want. You freeze half of it, you save half of it, and you got a week's worth of whatever it is that you're going to create.
Nice. Yeah, I just try to get the colors of the rainbow when you're doing vegetables. So
exactly.
Just everything should be green. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And sometimes, depending on the type of year, it can be difficult. But yeah, getting those cruciferous, whatever it is, and again, you can say all these terms, but it just really comes down to what do they enjoy. Because, like you said, get some colors.
Yeah.
Eat as many vegetables as you can, and really, I mean, if the only thing you eat is broccoli, I'm not gonna shame you, but try and get some diversity. But yeah, it's great. Just any and as many.
Yeah, fantastic. Anything else you want to share with our listeners before we wrap up here?
Your question, you said who were the people I listened to. I guess I should have boasted and said me, right? I should have said BackedBriScience, Brian. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram now. For anyone that's interested in more, feel free to reach out. Always welcome questions, follow-ups. So I'm on Instagram and like you said, at BackedBriScience.com, and then is my website and Instagram at Brian Devorkin.
Fantastic. All right, so I'm starting a new segment here. I did this last week too, but so in an effort to get more folks to eat healthy in season, I'm going to be sharing kind of what's in season on the show every week. And then there's a website I'm going to be posting. I did it for this week as well. So basically you can kind of go in by state and month and say, what's in season based on where you are in the U.S. So just currently in the Midwest, there's actually quite a bit because it's summertime, which is nice. You can kind of eat just about anything you want fresh, but kind of the main items that I see when I go to a farmer's market right now are blueberries, blackberries, cherries, beans, peas, carrots, lettuces, garlic, and onions. And that's just a short list. There's probably another, dozen or so vegetables that are in season right now. So you can see those on the website. Brian, thanks again for being on the show. We'll post all this stuff, and hope everybody listens to the podcast and learns a little bit more about health and wellness. So thank you.
Hope it makes a difference, and I'm glad that you're doing this and providing some information for the people. So it's a great thing. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, Brian.